Imagine arriving in a city where iconic historical landmarks stand side by side with neighborhoods you've never seen in postcards. Places where every street corner seems to tell two stories at once. Philadelphia, the cradle of American democracy, is known for Independence Hall, the Liberty Bell, and its vibrant arts scene. Yet, behind those celebrated facades lies another reality. An entrenched web of poverty, addiction, and neglect that stretches from Kensington Avenue to forgotten pockets of North and West Philly. In today's video, we'll peel back the layers to reveal 10 truths that most visitors never see. Stories of individuals who work multiple low-wage jobs just to stay off the streets, families displaced by soaring rents, and neighborhoods haunted by the opioid epidemic. One of the later topics will expose an operation touted as cleaning up the city, only to leave pain and frustration behind. You won't want to miss that part, because it highlights how deeply entrenched these problems are, and how surface-level solutions can sometimes make matters worse. If you're ready to discover Philadelphia's hidden side and understand how historical forces and contemporary crises collide, stick around. And if you haven't yet, click subscribe now to follow World Marvels for more deep dives into places you thought you knew. Let's begin. 10. Women's struggle. Women in Philadelphia's most vulnerable neighborhoods face a unique convergence of challenges that often go unreported. In areas battered by poverty and crime, many single mothers juggle multiple part-time jobs, from cleaning homes to working behind restaurant counters, just to pay rent. A one-bedroom apartment in these neighborhoods can cost around $1,100 a month, roughly $1,100 US. Yet local retail and hospitality positions rarely pay more than $10 to $12 per hour. With such low wages, even full-time work often fails to cover basic necessities like utilities, groceries, and childcare. In response, some women turn to informal work, selling homemade goods on street corners or taking in boarders, which helps pay bills but exposes them to unstable living situations. Compounding these economic strains are issues of domestic violence and sexual exploitation. Shelters designed for abuse survivors frequently lack sufficient space. Strict entry rules, such as mandatory curfews or requirements to attend counseling groups, can discourage battered women from seeking safety there. As a result, many continue to live with abusive partners or spend nights in their cars, fearing for their children's well-being yet unable to secure alternative housing. In certain areas like Kensington, human trafficking networks exploit the most vulnerable women, luring them with promises of legitimate work, only to force them into exploitative situations once they arrive. These women often lack access to comprehensive health services. Prenatal and reproductive care facilities are sparse in low-income areas. Without consistent medical attention, pregnancies go unmonitored, and postpartum support is nearly non-existent. Even professional women aren't immune. Consider a single mother working as a certified nursing assistant. Her salary hovers around $35,000 a year, about $35,000 US. Yet, with annual rent near $13,200 and rising inflation, she may find herself evicted after a single missed paycheck. These repeated evictions leave women in a relentless cycle, moving from short-term rentals to overcrowded rooms, or worse, into makeshift encampments when no alternatives exist. To see these struggles in action, look to local advocacy groups like Women's Way or the Women's Shelter Solutions Collaborative. They analyze data showing that 60% of female-headed households in Philadelphia live below the poverty line. Despite these organizations' tireless efforts, providing legal aid, emergency grants, and counseling, the pace of systemic change remains agonizingly slow. For many women, a small raise or a single affordable housing unit can mean the difference between a dignified life and perpetual uncertainty. 9. First impressions. At first glance, Philadelphia strikes you as a city where history and culture converge. Center City buzzes with coffee shops, art galleries, and modern high-rises overlooking cobblestone streets. Independence National Historical Park draws throngs of tourists eager to photograph the Liberty Bell and trace the footsteps of the Founding Fathers. Nearby, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, with its rocky steps, invites visitors to sprint up its grand stairway, often donning the iconic red boxing gloves of the city's cinematic underdog. The food scene matches the city's reverence for tradition and innovation. Local chefs reimagine the classic Philly cheesesteak in fusion dishes, while markets like Reading Terminal offer artisanal cheeses, freshly baked pretzels, and Pennsylvania Dutch delicacies. On weekend mornings, farmers markets spring up, showcasing fresh produce, craft coffee, and specialty meats that reflect the city's diverse immigrant communities. Yet if you drift just half a mile off the beaten tourist path, the glow of street lamps gives way to flickering wires and boarded-up windows. In neighborhoods like Fairhill and Kensington, grocery store aisles are replaced by convenience stores selling cheap, processed foods. You'll notice makeshift shelters under highway overpasses, where residents sleep beside piles of trash and discarded shopping carts. The polished storefronts and colorful murals of Center City suddenly feel worlds away. Job posters and cafe windows advertise tech sector roles paying upwards of $90,000, about $90,000 US. Yet down the block, signs on telephone poles read, "Help wanted, $10 per hour for entry-level retail positions." Young professionals in well-fitted suits weave past older men holding cardboard signs begging for spare change. The energy of the historic districts, tours of colonial homes, bike paths along the Schuylkill River, exists in parallel with a harsher reality. A city where economic growth has not reached every neighborhood. This jarring juxtaposition is why Philadelphia's first impression is so layered. On the surface, it exudes vitality. Thriving college campuses like the University of Pennsylvania draw bright minds, creating a bubble of affluence. But beneath that bubble, PHP, public housing projects, like Sharswood and Ludlow are home to families struggling with mold-infested apartments and poor ventilation, which contribute to high rates of asthma among children. The smiles of street musicians performing near Rittenhouse Square mask the desperation of those who perform not for art, but for spare change to feed themselves. Once you recognize this duality, as you sip a latte in Old City and glance at a tent down the block, you understand that Philadelphia's true first impression is a city of rare beauty shadowed by persistent need. 8. Historical rise. Philadelphia's rise to prominence began in the late 17th century, when William Penn laid out the city on a grid inspired by the idea of green country towns. By the mid-18th century, it had become a central hub for intellectual exchange, hosting the First Continental Congress in 1774 and serving as the nation's capital from 1790 to 1800. Leaders like Benjamin Franklin and Betsy Ross contributed to its reputation as a birthplace of innovation and civic engagement. Throughout the 19th century, Philadelphia earned the moniker Workshop of the World. Shipyards along the Delaware River churned out naval vessels. Textile mills in Kensington produced fabrics for military uniforms. Ironworks in Manayunk crafted machinery that fueled the Industrial Revolution. Immigrants poured in from Ireland, Italy, and Eastern Europe, lending their labor to factories and shaping vibrant ethnic enclaves. Neighborhoods like South Philadelphia became renowned for tight-knit Italian-American communities, where family-run pizzerias drew crowds and community festivals honored saints with parades and carousel rides. By the early 20th century, Philadelphia's manufacturing prowess was on full display. The Baldwin Locomotive Works in West Philadelphia produced over 70% of all steam locomotives used in the United States by 1929. During World War II, the Navy Yard spanned 1,200 acres and employed over 41,000 workers, building warships that patrolled the Atlantic. This period of prosperity fostered stable employment. Many families could afford homeownership, sending their children to well-funded public schools. The population swelled past 2 million, making Philadelphia the nation's third-largest city by 1930. However, cracks began to show in the 1950s as industries faced competition from the Midwest and imports from overseas. Suburbanization lured middle-class families away, draining tax revenues and leaving behind older housing stock. In the 1960s and 1970s, deindustrialization accelerated. Factories shuttered, manufacturing jobs evaporated, and unemployment surged. As the workforce shifted toward service sectors, the city struggled to retrain displaced workers. Despite the eventual growth of universities and healthcare institutions, which now employ thousands in research and medical technology, this new economy never fully replaced the wages earned by factory workers. By the 1990s, Philadelphia began a renaissance in Center City. Historic row houses were restored, arts districts flourished, and restaurants popped up in formerly neglected buildings. Yet this revival largely bypassed neighborhoods still marked by industrial decline. While the skyline transformed with gleaming office towers and luxury condominiums, sections of North and West Philadelphia, once anchored by factories, remained haunted by vacant lots and derelict structures. Thus, the city's historical rise, built on industry and immigration, created a foundation for both prosperity and, ultimately, profound inequality when that industry vanished. 7. Inescapable poverty. Today, Philadelphia's poverty statistics are among the highest in major U.S. cities. More than 23% of residents live below the federal poverty line, and nearly 10% endure extreme poverty, rates that eclipse the national average. This is not an abstract issue. It's woven into the city's fabric. In neighborhoods like North Philadelphia and Kensington, you'll find blocks of shuttered storefronts, broken streetlights, and apartment buildings where tenants share 4 to 6 families within single-family row homes just to afford rent. Consider the typical family of 4, 2 parents working minimum wage jobs, approximately $7.25 per hour, required to earn at least $50,000 annually just to cover rent, utilities, food, and healthcare. Yet the median wage for service industry positions hovers around $22,000 a year. The math doesn't add up, forcing families into impossible choices: pay rent and skip meals, or eat and risk eviction. The cruel irony is that a single missed paycheck, perhaps due to illness, can cascade into utility shutoffs and homelessness. The housing crunch hits youth and seniors hardest. Approximately 17% of Philadelphia's homeless population is under age 18, often stemming from family instability or foster care system failures. Young adults exiting juvenile detention or foster programs receive little transitional support, leaving them on the brink of homelessness. For seniors, affordable housing options are nearly non-existent. A one-bedroom apartment in public housing can cost around $650 per month, around $650 US, but waitlists stretch years long. Consequently, many seniors end up living in their cars or makeshift shelters. Food insecurity compounds these issues. Nearly 1 in 3 Philadelphians relies on emergency food assistance. Local food banks distribute thousands of meals weekly, but lines stretch blocks long, and supplies run out before everyone is served. Families facing hunger often resort to calorie-dense, nutrient-poor foods, cheap processed items that contribute to obesity, diabetes, and related health problems. Schools in these neighborhoods report higher absentee rates and lower graduation rates, perpetuating a cycle where education fails as an escape route. Moreover, healthcare disparities run deep. Low-income neighborhoods lack nearby clinics, forcing residents to travel long distances for medical care they cannot afford. Chronic conditions go untreated, and emergency rooms, often overwhelmed, become default care centers. Mental health services, particularly for those battling addiction, are scarce. Waiting lists for affordable counseling or rehab facilities can stretch months, leaving individuals to fend for themselves on the streets, worsening the cycle of poverty. Public transportation, while extensive, still leaves gaps. Routes through impoverished areas often run infrequently, making it hard to reach job sites or healthcare appointments on time. Missing a bus can lead to lateness, lost wages, and repeated reprimands at work, another step toward job loss. In suburban regions around Philadelphia, property values rise as city dwellers who can afford to leave escape to neighborhoods with better-funded schools and safer streets. This exodus further drains city resources, shrinking the tax base and leaving behind those with the least. Addressing this inescapable poverty requires more than charity. It demands systemic overhaul. From increasing the minimum wage and expanding affordable housing to bolstering public education and providing universal healthcare access, solutions are complex and often politically contentious. Yet, as long as half of Philadelphia's neighborhoods remain in this cycle, the promise of a thriving, equitable city will remain out of reach. These are the bitter truths hidden behind the city's historic landmarks and cultural treasures. 6. Origins decline. Philadelphia's descent from industrial powerhouse to urban struggle began in the mid-20th century. Factories that once fueled the local economy closed in rapid succession, driven by global competition and technological changes. Once thriving plants, textile mills in Kensington, shipyards on the Delaware River, and locomotive works in West Philadelphia could no longer compete with lower labor costs abroad. In the 1970s and 1980s, these closures precipitated a wave of unemployment, leaving tens of thousands of workers jobless almost overnight. Neighborhoods built around factory employment bore the initial shock. Families who had relied on stable manufacturing wages experienced sudden income loss. Young adults who might have stepped into steady union jobs found their aspirations dashed. Instead of inheriting stable livelihoods, they confronted a shrinking job market dominated by low-wage service sector work. As tax revenues from payroll and property taxes declined, city officials faced budget shortfalls, leading to cuts in public services. Street maintenance lagged, public transit routes were reduced, and funding for local schools dwindled. The net effect was a spiral. Fewer services led to declining quality of life, which discouraged new businesses from opening, further contracting job opportunities. Amid shrinking public investment, real estate markets shifted. With fewer residents able to afford homes, vacancy rates climbed. Speculators bought up properties at depressed prices, but many simply left them boarded, awaiting a future return to profitability rather than rehabilitating them for immediate rental or sale. The resultant vacant lots and derelict buildings became magnets for squatters, illicit activity, and eventually, open-air drug markets. This was especially apparent in Kensington, where entire blocks turned into informal encampments. Attempts to revitalize targeted Center City and University City were anchored by institutions like the University of Pennsylvania and Drexel University. Significant funds poured into renovating historic row houses, converting them into luxury apartments or student housing. New restaurants, art galleries, and tech startups proliferated, sparking a renaissance of sorts in select neighborhoods. Yet these gains bypassed many North and West Philadelphia districts. Rising property values in revitalized areas triggered gentrification, pricing out longtime residents who lacked the means to stay. This process accelerated the exodus of middle-class families to suburbs, cementing an economic divide between the city's prosperous enclaves and its neighborhoods left behind. Political fragmentation compounded these trends. Decisions about zoning, housing policy, and budget priorities often fell prey to fractured interests. While some council members advocated for affordable housing, others resisted new developments they feared would alter neighborhood character or reduce property values. Without a unified vision, policy responses to the decline remained fragmented, halting progress and leaving many neighborhoods to fend for themselves. Today, Philadelphia still feels the lingering effects of that slow-motion collapse. Industrial ghosts stand alongside gleaming high-rises, a stark reminder that once a city loses its economic foundation, rebuilding requires more than flashy redevelopment. It demands inclusive, long-term strategies that prioritize those most impacted. 5. Kensington Avenue. Kensington Avenue stands as Philadelphia's most stark emblem of urban distress. Once a bustling commercial corridor, it now reverberates with the sounds and sights of a community in crisis. Shuttered storefronts, formerly leather shops, bakeries, and hardware stores, have given way to makeshift tents and tarps that stretch block after block. Beneath highway overpasses, personal belongings are piled atop tattered blankets. Discarded shopping carts carry the few possessions of those living on the streets. The fragrance of spilled food and uncollected garbage mingles in the air, while sidewalks double as places for cooking over open flames. The transformation accelerated in the early 2000s as deindustrialization reached its zenith. With few remaining job opportunities, residents who once earned livable wages in factories drifted into informal economies, panhandling, selling small contraband items, and, for some, participating in the burgeoning opioid trade. Today, open-air drug markets operate almost unimpeded, with 24/7 activity. Dealers and users alike navigate a constant stream of makeshift stalls offering syringes and small packets of narcotics. Observers frequently report scenes of people injecting drugs in broad daylight, sometimes collapsing in doorways or under streetlights, while passers-by navigate around them with practiced caution. Law enforcement interventions, targeted sweeps and raids, have periodically cleared visible camps, but residents often resettle in adjacent side streets, under overpasses, or in vacant lots. The lack of stable housing options ensures that temporary dispersals only shuffle the crisis geographically. Social service providers coordinate mobile outreach teams to offer clean syringes, harm reduction counseling, and naloxone, a life-saving overdose reversal drug, but these efforts are merely a bandage on a deeper wound. With a reported 1/3 of Philadelphia's homeless population suffering from mental illness, Kensington's drug-fueled environment disproportionately affects individuals who lack family support or financial resources to seek treatment. Among the area's most heartrending stories is that of xylazine or xylazine, an animal tranquilizer increasingly mixed with fentanyl or heroin. This combination produces a sedation so profound that users can remain unconscious for days, slumping against building facades, their skin marred by wounds where repeated injections have caused tissue to rot. Hospitals report seeing patients with severe infections requiring amputations, an epidemic within an epidemic. What's especially alarming, because xylazine is not an opioid, traditional overdose treatments like naloxone often fail to revive victims. Families scramble to find any treatment center offering protocols geared for xylazine, but waiting lists for specialized care can be months long, leaving many without timely intervention. Despite the grim reality, community activists strive to inject rays of hope. Organizations like Kensington Corridor Trust and Prevention Point Philadelphia operate needle exchanges, host mobile health clinics, and advocate for supervised injection facilities, spaces where individuals can use under medical supervision, reducing overdose deaths and curbing disease transmission. These facilities, common in parts of Europe and Canada, remain contentious in U.S. cities like Philadelphia, facing political resistance and local opposition. Still, until such programs gain broader acceptance, Kensington Avenue remains a tableau of human suffering, a vivid reminder that when economic collapse and addiction converge, public policy must rapidly adapt to save lives. 4. Opioid epidemic. Philadelphia's opioid crisis is among the most severe in the United States. Prescription painkillers, once generously dispensed in the 1990s, hooked many patients on opioids like oxycodone and hydrocodone. As regulation tightened and prescription opioids became harder to obtain, a silent tide shifted. Users turned to heroin, which offered a cheaper high. By 2010, heroin-related overdose deaths in the city had tripled compared to the early 2000s. The crisis deepened further with the arrival of fentanyl, a synthetic opioid 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine. Often clandestinely mixed with heroin or pressed into counterfeit pills, fentanyl made drug supply chains chaotic and lethal. Users believing they were purchasing pure heroin or prescription pills found themselves facing substances too potent for their tolerance levels. Overdose rates skyrocketed. In 2022 alone, Philadelphia recorded over 1,500 overdose deaths, with a striking 70% involving fentanyl. Complicating matters, xylazine emerged as a devastating new threat. Originally an animal tranquilizer used in veterinary medicine, xylazine found its way into street drugs. When combined with fentanyl, it acts as a powerful sedative, quieting overdoses that would otherwise be reversible by naloxone. Individuals crash into deep sedation, their breathing slowed to nearly nothing, and their skin deteriorates from repeated injection wounds. Hospitals struggle to treat these patients. Wound care often exceeds the capacity of emergency wards, and behavioral health units lack expertise to manage xylazine withdrawal. Community organizations have responded by distributing naloxone kits and offering safe syringe exchanges. Prevention Point Philadelphia, for instance, distributes over 1.2 million sterile syringes annually, reducing HIV and hepatitis C transmission rates dramatically. Outreach workers also connect individuals to treatment providers, offering warm handoffs to detox facilities. Yet capacity remains limited. During peak months, detox centers can be booked for weeks, leaving individuals at high risk of overdose. Many cannot navigate insurance or documentation requirements, particularly undocumented immigrants and those recently released from incarceration. The epidemic's ripple effects extend beyond individual health crises. Emergency medical services, EMS, calls for overdoses consume valuable resources, diverting ambulances away from other emergencies. City-funded budgets for overdose response have ballooned, crowding out other healthcare priorities. Police departments deploy officers to overdose hotspots, but without parallel social support services, law enforcement interventions often seem punitive rather than restorative. Families watch loved ones disappear into a vortex of addiction, confronting daily uncertainty over whether they'll survive the next encounter with razor-thin hospital resources. Municipal leaders have recognized the urgency. In 2023, Philadelphia allocated $45 million, $45 million US dollars, for opioid treatment and prevention programs, a 20% increase from the previous year. These funds underwrite expanded access to medication-assisted treatment, MAT, like buprenorphine, which can stabilize users. However, geographic distribution remains uneven. Clinics offering MAT cluster near Center City and University City, leaving Kensington and other high-need areas with few accessible options. Researchers estimate that only 1 in 10 opioid users in high-crisis zones access treatment. Until this gap narrows, Philadelphia's opioid epidemic will continue to claim lives and corrode community resilience. 3. Housing crisis. Philadelphia's housing crisis rivals that of any major American city. More than a third of the region's homeless population lives in Philadelphia proper. In 2024, point-in-time counts estimated over 5,000 individuals sleeping in the city's shelters and on the streets, an increase of nearly 15% from the prior year. Contributing factors include skyrocketing rent costs, stagnant wages, and restrictive zoning policies that limit new affordable development. The average rent for a modest two-bedroom in neighborhoods like South Street or Manayunk exceeds $1,500 per month, $1,500 US dollars. Yet the minimum wage in Pennsylvania remains $7.25 per hour, equating to a monthly income of barely $1,160 before taxes for a full-time worker, insufficient to cover rent, utilities, and food. Many families resort to sharing cramped apartments. It's not uncommon for 2 or 3 households to occupy a single row home, each paying partial rent. Others move into motels that double as unofficial shelters, paying $40 to $50 per night for a room often lacking adequate heat or consistent water supply. Landlords, faced with high market demand in gentrifying areas, gamble on waiting for higher-paying tenants instead of maintaining lower-rent properties. The result? Evictions have surged. In 2023 alone, Philadelphia's landlord-tenant court processed over 30,000 eviction filings. While many filings settle before court, thousands still lead to rental termination and forced displacement. Once evicted, families confront steep fees if they seek to stay on the Housing Choice Voucher waitlist, some paying up to $1,000 in application fees and security deposits they cannot afford. Complicating matters, municipal affordable housing initiatives struggle to keep pace. In theory, projects like Housing First aim to house chronically homeless individuals without requiring sobriety or mental health treatment as prerequisites. In practice, only about 500 units became available through such programs in 2024, far short of the estimated 10,000 units needed to substantially reduce chronic homelessness. Proposals to convert vacant lots into mixed-income developments face opposition from local residents who fear increased density will strain schools and infrastructure. Meanwhile, nonprofit developers report costs above $350,000 per unit when accounting for land acquisition, construction, and regulatory compliance, figures that dwarf federal grants that typically provide $50,000 to $75,000 per unit. Public shelters, while life-saving, remain an imperfect solution. To enter a city-run shelter, guests face strict rules: no pets, mandatory curfews, and periodic room inspections. These conditions push many to avoid shelters altogether, preferring the relative autonomy of tents, abandoned buildings, or cars parked in safe zones. For families with children, shelters often require separating fathers from mothers, policies that discourage fathers from entering, leaving many homeless families without their paternal figure. In winter months, although warming centers open to provide short-term refuge, capacity rarely matches demand. Reports surface each season of hypothermia-related deaths among individuals who decline shelter because of its stringent regulations or because they worried about theft of meager belongings. Gentrification further complicates the crisis. as neighborhoods like Fishtown and Northern Liberties attract young professionals eager for loft-style living. Mid-rise luxury apartments spring up at prices above $2,500 per month. Landlords in adjacent older buildings jump rent to match market rates, displacing low to moderate-income tenants who can't keep pace. Long-time residents find themselves caught in a squeeze. Increasing rents coupled with shrinking affordable supply. Outmigration from these neighborhoods pushes families further north or west, where housing stock is cheaper but schools and jobs are farther away, exacerbating transportation costs and eroding community networks. Small-scale solutions emerge. Community land trusts protect parcels for future affordable housing, and local organizations sponsor rapid rehousing grants that cover rent for up to 6 months. Efforts to reduce development fees on affordable units aim to make new construction financially viable for nonprofit developers. Yet such programs rely heavily on philanthropic donations and inconsistent government grants. Without systemic policy shifts, like robust rent control, increased federal funding for housing, and zoning reforms prioritizing affordable development, Philadelphia's housing crisis remains a wrenching feature of city life, perpetuating instability for thousands and anchoring poverty in place. 2. Insufficient solutions. Philadelphia's leadership has launched numerous initiatives to address homelessness, drug addiction, and urban decay, but many efforts fall short due to lack of scope or sustained funding. In the mid-2010s, the city unveiled the Zero Waste Plan to clear encampments and reduce litter, coordinating street sweeps that remove tents and debris from major thoroughfares. On the surface, sidewalks looked cleaner for a few days, but residents simply migrated to adjacent blocks, forming new camps under highway underpasses or behind abandoned row houses. As homelessness was pushed out of sight rather than properly addressed, these operations achieved only temporary aesthetic relief, leaving the crisis intact. Similarly, enforcement actions targeting drug markets have yielded little long-term benefit. Missions like Operation Fishnet, initiated in 2018, aimed to dismantle open-air drug markets along Kensington Avenue. Every few months, hundreds of officers conducted raids, confiscating narcotics and arresting individuals for possession or sale. Local media praised early successes, stashes of heroin and fentanyl seized, numbers of arrests tallied, and brief shutdowns of known hotspots. Yet, within weeks, dealers re-established informal markets in nearby side streets. Without readily available treatment options, many dealers and users cycled through jails only to return to the same environment. Incarceration did not translate into rehabilitation. Without comprehensive wraparound services, former inmates frequently relapsed into drug use or turned to other criminal activities, perpetuating the cycle of enforcement and release. Public health responses, although well-intentioned, remain under-resourced. Needle exchange programs, spearheaded by nonprofits like Prevention Point Philadelphia, distribute over 1 million sterile syringes annually, reducing HIV and hepatitis C transmission rates by an estimated 80% in participating neighborhoods. However, funding shortfalls force periodic closures of mobile units, leaving gaps in service. Clinics offering medication-assisted treatment, MAT, such as methadone and buprenorphine struggle to keep pace with demand. Some clinics require proof of residence or impose sliding scale fees patients cannot afford. Consequently, only about 1 in 5 opioid-dependent individuals in high-need areas access MAT regularly. Housing First pilot programs, lauded by advocates, place chronically homeless individuals directly into permanent supportive housing. Yet only a fraction of those in need benefit. As of 2024, approximately 500 units were available, a drop in the bucket compared to an estimated 10,000 chronically homeless individuals in Philadelphia. Complex application processes, requiring background checks, coordination between multiple social service agencies, and steady sources of supplementary income, discourage many from applying. Meanwhile, some proposed supportive housing development stall in City Council due to neighborhood opposition, the not-in-my-backyard phenomenon, delaying progress by years. The disconnect between political promises and on-the-ground realities frustrates service providers, who watch vulnerable clients slip through loopholes created by bureaucratic red tape. Moreover, fragmentation among city, state, and federal agencies further hinders cohesive strategy. The Philadelphia Housing Authority, PHA, manages public housing units but faces a backlog of repair requests and chronic underfunding from HUD, the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. Meanwhile, the Office of Homeless Services, OHS, coordinates shelter operations but often lacks real-time data sharing with PHA or the Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services. BIDS. As a result, individuals cycling between jails, hospitals, and shelters may confront conflicting eligibility requirements, prolonging their time on the streets. The absence of a unified digital dashboard to track client progress means caseworkers spend more time navigating interdepartmental protocols than serving clients. Philanthropic contributions, though generous, cannot substitute for robust policy change. Several large nonprofits concentrate services in Center City and University City, leveraging proximity to wealthy donors and academic partners. However, East and North Philadelphia neighborhoods are frequently bypassed, leaving resource deserts where even basic outreach is sporadic. Local fundraisers spotlight high-visibility campaigns, e.g., holiday toy drives, winter coat distributions, but critics argue these efforts serve as bandages, failing to address root causes like structural racism, decades of disinvestment, and income inequality. Until cash-strapped agencies receive stable, multi-year funding, rather than short-term grants, Philadelphia's social safety net will continue to fray, and ineffective solutions will perpetuate cycles of poverty and addiction. 1. Operation 2024. In early 2024, Philadelphia's mayor and council unveiled Operation 2024. Reclaiming Our Streets, billed as the city's most ambitious cleanup in decades. The plan allocated $2 million, approximate $2 million US dollars, to mobilize 300 sanitation workers, 100 police officers, and 50 social workers over a 6-week period, aiming to dismantle encampments along Kensington Avenue and redirect residents into temporary shelters. City Hall promoted before and after images. Streets cleared of tents, garbage removed, and businesses able to reopen. Politicians lauded the operation as proof of responsiveness to citizens' concerns, while local media broadcast footage of construction crews hoisting tarps and folding tents. To encourage individuals to accept shelter, the city partnered with local motels to secure 200 temporary rooms, safe sleep sites. Outfitted with beds, cots, and access to meals 3 times daily, outreach teams offered bus passes, hygiene kits, and referrals to nearby clinics for addiction counseling. At its onset, Operation 2024 seemed promising. More than 150 individuals accepted a bed, and some expressed relief at trading tent living for indoor accommodations. Small businesses along the avenue, coffee shops, thrift stores, and bakeries saw short-term spikes in foot traffic as cleaning crews created a temporary image of revival. However, cracks in the initiative surfaced quickly. Of the 150 who initially accepted motel rooms, fewer than 60 remained after 2 weeks. Locations proved isolating, situated beyond walking distance from trusted community centers, making it difficult for residents to maintain social ties or continue part-time jobs. Strict regulations in safe sleep sites prohibited individuals above a certain alcohol or drug blood concentration, disqualifying deeply addicted persons. Those cleared as under the influence returned to the streets, facing a fractured sense of trust toward outreach workers. Within 3 weeks, new encampments formed just blocks away from the original sites. Displaced residents migrated to underpasses beneath I-95, to empty garages, and to side streets behind residential blocks. Social workers reported that nearly half of those initially offered shelter declined on returning to the avenue. They had lost belongings during forced clearances, and many feared police would confiscate identification documents or small amounts of cash they carried to survive. Upon refusing transport, they often disappeared into informal networks, becoming harder to contact. Opioid overdoses in Kensington spiked during Operation 2024. With heroin and fentanyl users unable to access harm reduction services unimpeded, overdose clusters occurred in areas lacking outreach. At one temporary data collection meeting, medical examiners reported an uptick of 15% in overdose deaths compared to the prior period, coinciding with the sweeps. Pharmaceutical trace analysis revealed that xylazine-laced fentanyl remained pervasive, and naloxone use without additional medical support proved insufficient, underscoring the limited impact of short-term interventions. Local nonprofits voiced frustration as they watched funding prioritized for cleanup logistics rather than expanding treatment capacity. Prevention Point Philadelphia noted delays in grant awards that could have underwritten mobile clinics in East Kensington. Simultaneously, community activists rallied outside City Hall, displaying signs with slogans like, "Not just clean streets, we want homes." They argued that the operation served as a photo op for political leaders rather than a genuine remedy. These criticisms resonated when, a month after the initial wave, City Hall ended daily press briefings on Operation 2024, shifting focus to renegotiating contracts for new policing measures and structurally ignoring demands to allocate resources toward durable housing initiatives. Disappointed residents, forced from tents and with no secure place to store belongings, shared stories of having lost medical records and disability documentation during the sweeps. One older veteran recounted losing a bag containing his only state-issued ID, which took months to replace, further complicating his access to VA benefits and entitling programs. Another local mother described dragging her 3 young children to a shelter 15 blocks away, only to be turned away because the family unit exceeded capacity. They returned to a tent site littered with personal items stolen during a daytime cleanup, leaving her and her kids to sleep in a cardboard structure under a highway overpass. By mid-2024, city officials began quietly acknowledging Operation 2024's shortcomings. Internal memos revealed that only 30% of those offered temporary housing found permanent support, leaving the majority to return to unstable conditions. Proposed plans to reinvest leftover funds into expanding public housing units were shelved amid budget disagreements, with fiscal analysts warning that diverting money would require cutting other essential services. In effect, Operation 2024 became emblematic of Philadelphia's broader struggle. Well-publicized yet short-lived attempts that treat visible symptoms, trash, tents, derelict buildings, without the deeper work of funding affordable housing, scaling up treatment centers, and dismantling systemic barriers preventing low-income residents from escaping cycles of poverty and addiction. The result leaves Kensington Avenue and other impacted neighborhoods little changed, as the carousel of clearing and rebuilding continues, year after year. Philadelphia's story is a tapestry woven with extraordinary achievements and sobering setbacks. From its birth as a cradle of democracy and its apex as workshop of the world, to its present-day struggles on Kensington Avenue and beyond, the city's legacy reminds us that progress is never guaranteed. Addressing entrenched poverty, the opioid crisis, and the housing emergency demands more than periodic headlines. It requires sustained political will, cohesive policy, and genuine investment in people. We have witnessed how temporary cleanups and fragmented initiatives fail to heal communities when underlying economic and social vulnerabilities remain ignored. Now, we want to hear from you. What solution do you believe could truly transform neighborhoods like Kensington? Could rent control coupled with expanded harm reduction facilities make a lasting impact? Or is a more radical restructuring of public services the answer? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective might spark a conversation that leads to real change. If you found this exploration enlightening, don't forget to like and share, and subscribe for more revealing stories from World Marvels. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Philadelphia's overlooked truths. Until next time, may we all continue to seek understanding in every corner of our world.